And a good Friday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, and X. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen on the website, nickcraig.com. If you are trying to listen or watch it on a computer, nickcraig.com is the website for that. Well, good Friday morning to you. Got a busy show planned for you this morning. We start off with a story that we spent some pretty significant time on yesterday. That is the tariff situation that continues to unfold. That was one of our big conversations last night on our monthly hangout. Some new folks in our monthly hangout, which is exclusive to our Patreon members over at patreon.com/Nick Craig. We spent a lot of time talking about tariffs last night, and of course, all of this possible thanks to our good friends over at the Law Group here in Wilmington. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com, and we'll have more on them coming up a little bit later on. So just going off of our Zoom chat last night with our Patreon members, the consensus was pretty clear that most people, at least everybody that we chatted with last night, is of the opinion and of the mindset that we have to give it some amount of time. And I think that's a fair thing. I mean, there's often this concept, this idea that pretty much anything in society, there just needs to be some sort of magic wand you can wave and you solve the problem. And of course, inherently, we know that that's not the case. But as we are in this age now with constant gratification for everything that we do, whether it's social media or things of that nature, this constant likes and clicks and immediate responses to things, it's hard for people to wait things out. I mean, you look at the short attention spans that people have now, it's very tough to lay something out and say, hey, this might take 6, 8, 12, 18, 24, 36 months for something to play out. But that is the reality of something like tariffs, right? It's not an immediate fix. And it was, of course, noted last night as well, and I've talked about this ad nauseum at this point. The idea long term is to not keep sweeping tariffs permanently in place. At least that's what I don't think it is. I'm no inside baseball there. It's just from everything I've gathered. The concept is put these excessive tariffs on many of our strongest trading partners in terms of where we've got issues with, places like China and Mexico. Force them to come to the negotiating table and hammer out a better deal for the United States. So yesterday morning, we covered details out of the U.S. International Court of Trade that ruled, a 3-judge panel ruled that the president did not have the authority under a law passed in the mid-1970s by Congress to put these sweeping tariffs in place. The argument from the court was that if the president wants to continue with things of this nature, he has to go through the congressional process to do it. He's got to go to the House, he's got to go to the Senate and convince them to pass these tariffs. So while the U.S. Court of International Trade issued that injunction, the White House filed an emergency motion, which we talked about yesterday, to stay the rulings. And with that, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal District did in fact reinstate Trump's tariff policies yesterday afternoon. This came out yesterday with this decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the circuit, and those tariffs can stay in place for now. The Trump administration had earlier told the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit that it was seeking, quote, emergency relief from the court as soon as possible for the tariff ruling. The pause gives the Trump administration some breathing room as it prepares to argue the trade court's ruling should be halted for the duration of the appeal process. This is a very, very temporary stoppage. This is the appeals court for the federal appeal did not say, Trump, you're right, other court, you're wrong. This was a temporary ruling to give the Trump administration, as I just mentioned, a little bit of breathing room to gather their arguments, gather their claims, and go forward and play this out in court. Follow the process, as we're told, time and time again. Follow the process, follow the process, follow the process. Shortly before this decision was made, this appeals court decision, the press secretary and Caroline Leavitt, who I mentioned yesterday, was having a press briefing yesterday afternoon and had a strong suspicion that this was going to be a major topic, opened her commentary talking about this situation. Again, just for a timeline, this was before this emergency ruling came down. So this, when she was speaking yesterday, the U.S. International Trade Court had already ruled against the administration and had given them a 10-day period to get rid of those tariffs, not make any additional modifications to them, but get rid of them. And they had a 10-day time frame to do that. Here's the press secretary.
Last night, the Trump administration faced another example of judicial overreach. Using his full and proper legal authority, President Trump imposed universal tariffs and reciprocal tariffs on Liberation Day to address the extraordinary threat to our national security and economy posed by large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits. The United States has run a trade deficit of goods every year since 1975. In 2024, our trade deficit in goods exceeded $1 trillion. Everybody agrees this is unacceptable. President Trump is delivering on his promise to fix this problem, and he has taken a long overdue and much needed bold stance for American workers after decades of our manufacturing base being hollowed out. The president's rationale for imposing these powerful tariffs was legally sound and grounded in common sense. President Trump correctly believes that America cannot function safely long-term if we are unable to scale advanced domestic manufacturing capacity, have our own secure critical supply chains, and our defense industrial base is dependent on foreign adversaries. Three judges of the U.S. Court of International Trade disagreed and brazenly abused their judicial power to usurp the authority of President Trump.
Now, I'm going to stop the press secretary right here. I've got a little bit of an issue with her statement. We have seen an incredible amount of lawfare against the president, whether we're talking, when he was the former president, the indictments and all of the BS associated with that. No argument there at all. We've seen plenty of judges, district judges, federal district judges stepping in and blocking things like immigration decisions by the administration. And in all of that, I think the argument of judicial overreach is a sound and valid argument to make. The idea that you've got a relatively geographically small area of what a federal district judge court represents, telling the administration that they can't do things as it relates to immigration is absurd. But in this case, I don't really think the judicial overreach argument is really the solid one to make. The court that ruled on this was the U.S. International Trade Court. Right? This is not just some random left-wing judge in Washington State or some random left-wing judge in California that is ruling against the president because Orange Man bad. Now, you can still have your questions and your concerns over, did this court have the authority to step in? Sure. But this is a court that deals with trade. It's literally baked into the name of the court. So I get the point that Caroline Leavitt is trying to make. I get the argument that the administration is trying to make as they continue to talk about what have been ridiculous decisions from federal district judges. I just don't think it's relevant in this case. I get their stance. I get they're trying to paint this picture and paint this narrative that this is what continues to happen, because it has, absolutely. But you've got the trade court in the United States ruling on a trade matter. I don't know that that reaches the same level of judicial overreach that we talk about in some other cases. I just felt the need to point that out. I get what they're doing. I get the narrative that's trying to be spun, and there's a lot of truth in it. I just don't know that it's relevant for this specific argument. More from the press secretary.
To stop him from carrying out the mandate that the American people gave him. These judges failed to acknowledge that the President of the United States has core foreign affairs powers and authority given to him by Congress to protect the United States economy and national security. Congress had created the National Emergency Act to provide the congressional framework to strike down improper IEEPA use. And any questions over whether President Trump improperly imposed these IEEPA tariffs were already adjudicated in Congress following Liberation Day. Congress firmly rejected an effort led by Senator Rand Paul and Democrats to terminate the president's reciprocal tariffs. The courts should have no role here. There is a troubling and dangerous trend of unelected judges inserting themselves into the presidential decision-making process. America cannot function if President Trump, or any other president for that matter, has their sensitive diplomatic or trade negotiations railroaded by activist judges. President Trump is in the process of rebalancing America's trading agreements with the entire world, bringing tens of billions of dollars in tariff revenues to our country, and finally ending the United States of America from being ripped off. These judges are threatening to undermine the credibility of the United States on the world stage. The administration has already filed an emergency motion for a stay pending appeal and an immediate administrative stay to strike down this egregious decision. But ultimately, the Supreme Court must put an end to this for the sake of our Constitution and our country.
So that's Caroline Leavitt yesterday. Again, the timeline on all of this. This was at 1 o'clock a little after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The appeals court, which we just talked about, had not yet ruled on this decision. They did, in fact, come down and rule in favor of the Trump administration, at least in a temporary manner. And the pause with this, the order reads as follows: temporary stay until further notice while this court considers the motion papers, is what the appeals court wrote in its order. So there's the temporary stay on the U.S. Court of International Trade's decision on Wednesday, which will give the Trump administration time to figure out how they want to continue to battle this out. Again, I think the argument over judicial overreach, get the picture that's trying to be painted, but I don't know that I necessarily agree with it in this case. However, that's what the administration is trying to push out. That's what the administration is trying to project, and that's fine. That's their prerogative to do so. So now essentially we kind of sit in a little bit more of a holding pattern. That 10-day window that was put in place will not stay as of right now. Everything is temporarily paused until further notice. When that further notice comes out, who knows? It could be a couple of weeks potentially, and then we'll see how the administration wants to battle this out in court. So at least for the time being, all of the reciprocal tariffs that we have talked about that have been in place since Liberation Day, was described there by Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, at least do continue as of right now. I can imagine that the negotiation process will continue. Now, just taking all of this aside, going back to the crux of the issue here, this administration is, and of course, this being led by President Donald Trump, is attempting to use the art of the deal. We talked about this last night on our monthly hangout. This is textbook definition of President Trump's book from the 80s, Art of the Deal. He is putting an incredible amount of pressure on countries, specifically places like China with, at one point, 145% tariffs, to force them to come to the negotiating table. Now, I will agree with the administration with the idea that these constant attempts to block this, these constant attempts to stop this from going forward, is in fact hurting the president's ability to negotiate. There's no argument there at all. I can imagine many countries watching this back and forth go on in the legal system, watching even the wavering from the administration itself, where they put a 90-day pause on things, back and forth. All of this is probably hurting some of the negotiations, but it's twofold. Some of it is the lawfare. Some of it is just the constant switching and changing nature of the whole tariff discussion. I mean, one day we're told, there's not a chance that a 90-day pause is going to happen. Then 2 days later, we find out, in fact, there is a 90-day pause. Everything's going back down to 10%. It's a constant bouncing ball. And I don't know if that's intentional. I don't know if that's people like Peter Navarro and the president reacting to some of the public sentiment on what's going on. Not exactly sure why it's being handled in that way. Fortunately, the negotiations, at least with some of our larger partners, have started. Right, the negotiations with Mexico continue. Everything with China, at least outside of things that were already in place, are at least temporarily on hold while some of this shakes out and while they continue the trade talks there. So I'm not exactly sure where we kind of go from this long term. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, kind of in the middle on it. The idea of tariffs will, in fact, hurt the U.S. consumer. We will pay more for goods and services, products and goods. No arguments or questions about that. Is the United States being taken advantage of by many other countries in trade? Absolutely. And I think that's a very real and realistic threat and risk that this administration continues to push forward. But it is not free market. It is not, laissez-faire as it relates to government handling. So we're just going to have to wait and see and kind of see what some of that coverage looks like in the coming days and weeks as this plays out in the court system and as the negotiations continue. We'll keep a very close eye on it right here on the Nick Craig Show. We've got another update on a story from yesterday as well. We played that video, the video from Accuracy in Media, AIM, in which they went into UNC Charlotte and did one of those kind of Project Veritas, James O'Keefe undercover style videos, talking to somebody within UNC Charlotte who was talking about how diversity, equity, and inclusion is alive and well. Noted that the name is not alive and well. They've made changes to what they are calling a DEI, but that the processes themselves and some of the platforms of DEI are being done in a covert nature. All of this stems from a 2024 vote by the UNC Board of Governors when they decided to amend the DEI policies for the UNC system, which includes all of the statewide schools. At the time, they did that to maintain what they called, quote, institutional neutrality. Then, of course, we knew exactly what was going to happen here. Democrats were not going to give up the fight on DEI. These radical progressives that have been installed into these so-called institutions of higher learning were not just going to stop DEI. They were going to change the nameplates. They were going to change the names on the doors. They were going to change the name of the departments, but they were going to continue to push forward diversity, equity, and inclusion agendas within state-run schools. And that's one of the other things that I think is incredibly relevant to point out. I am a true capitalist. If a private business wants to play footsies with DEI, wants to play footsies with the progressive left and their radical ideas, that's their prerogative to do so. I don't think they should be mandated to stop DEI. I don't think they should be browbeaten into stopping it. If as a business, they believe that is their best way to go forward and believe that that is a good way to operate as a company, that's their choice. I don't want the government stepping in or having anything to say or do about it. As much as I despise these radical DEI efforts, which of course are not DEI, they're inherently discriminatory, they're inherently racist and pit people against each other based on characteristics that they have no control over. I don't think the government needs to step in and tell any business what to do. Fortunately, that's not happened yet. Hopefully it doesn't. I have the choice as a consumer as to whether I want to fund that business, right? We saw the controversy with Target back a couple of years ago, where they had all of these, these weird trans queer bathing suit things for 3 and 4 year olds right up in the front of their store. They were the champions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was their choice. Now, I don't think that should have been illegal for them to do so. I just chose not to shop at Target anymore. And to this day, continue to not. I couldn't tell you the last time I was there. So I made that choice as a consumer. If the business thinks it's good for business, run wild, right? Have at it. Not my choice, not my decision. That's your decision to make. However, when we talk about something like the UNC system, well, now that's a different story because I'm funding the UNC system whether I want to or not. Right? I pay my sales tax when I go out and buy something. I pay my personal income tax when I have to go through that process in April, like all of you, each and every year. I pay a variety of other taxes throughout the state of North Carolina, and I don't get a say as to whether that goes to the UNC system or not. So you had the Board of Governors, the Board of Trustees for UNC, the entire University of North Carolina system, revoke and amend their DEI policy back last year. So this video comes out late in the day. What's today? Friday. I guess late in the day on Wednesday. Wednesday night, this video comes out, the one we played yesterday morning. And it shows UNC Charlotte's Assistant Director of Leadership and Community Engagement, Jaqueen Sanders, saying on a hidden camera that DEI work does continue within the university. I mean, she said it's absolutely continuing, using words like it's being done in a, quote, covert nature. They're doing it, underground, secretly, under the radar. noting that there's no public-facing DEI positions, but in fact there is plenty of other positions that exist under a different name, but leadership this, but we're still pushing the DEI agenda. We're still pushing the DEI narrative. Plenty of reaction yesterday as it relates to this. Senator Phil Berger, the leader of the North Carolina Senate, commenting on X saying, quote, DEI, no matter what name or acronym you use, doesn't belong in education. The North Carolina Senate has already taken concrete steps to address this by passing Senate Bill 558 to eliminate DEI from UNC system schools and community colleges. Now that's great. I appreciate the comments there from Senator Berger, but the reality is we know these people are going to continue. We know these individuals are going to allow this stuff to take place. We know that they are still going to push for DEI. And the point I made to you yesterday, and we were discussing on the show, was realistically, what do? You can pass as many laws as you want. You can restrict as many policies from the UNC Board of Governors as you want. That's not going to work because it's very hard to see that in practicality. When you've got radical ideologues in these public education systems that are more interested in their own personal political agenda than what is being told to them and mandated to them by either the General Assembly or the UNC Board of Governors, you're kind of at a stalemate. Again, you can pass law ad nauseum, but if they're still going to do this stuff in a covert nature, still do this stuff secretly and under the radar and make sure that it's not publicly broadcasted that we're supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is very hard to tackle. And really the only thing I could come up with is it's time for these individuals that are expressing these ideas, that are admitting publicly that they are usurping the authority of the General Assembly or the Board of Governors or their chancellor, their dean, the authorities within their entities, they need to lose their jobs. I'm not a cancel culture guy. I don't like running around yelling and screaming about how people need to lose their livelihoods. I don't think that's good for society. But when you've got individuals that are actively pushing against policies that are being set above them, that they are legally obligated to follow, there has to be some level of consequence. You've heard me say it a million times. Actions have consequences. I don't want people to be fired. I don't want people to lose their jobs. I don't know of any other way to beat it through the heads of these far left progressive radicals that if you are going to push these agendas forward, if you are going to push these narratives forward and go with the incredibly divisive and vitriolic teachings of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that your ass is on the line. And it's really as simple as that. If you're going to operate in that manner, you are potentially going to face some serious consequences. Well, UNC Charlotte did respond to this yesterday. It blew up on social media. They had this to say. UNC Charlotte is aware of a video circulating on social media that shows an employee making statements that suggest the university is failing to uphold DEI-related policies and laws. The employee's statements were inaccurate and do not reflect the university's actions. UNC Charlotte continues to uphold both the letter and the spirit of the UNC system policy, as well as all federal and state laws. The individual featured in the video had no policy-making authority, no role in compliance matters, and was not authorized to speak on these issues. Following an internal review, the individual is no longer employed by UNC Charlotte. UNC Charlotte takes the statements and assertions made by the former employee seriously. The university, led by the Division of Student Affairs in partnership with the Office of Legal Affairs, will conduct a swift and thorough review to ensure that all employees understand and are adhering to applicable policies and laws. I don't know much about UNC Charlotte. Obviously, the fact that it is located in one of the more progressive areas of our state, I think it's a fair assumption to say it probably leans a little bit left. Just throwing that observation out there. This is a great statement by them. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Genuinely, I didn't think this was going to happen. I really thought that this was going to, have its little heyday on social media. I read yesterday the comments from Board of Governors member Woody White, who commented that he was going to instruct the Board of Governors to, reach out to UNC Charlotte, figure out what's going on here, conduct an investigation if necessary. UNC Charlotte acted very quickly. And this is, to me, the model and the standard that needs to continue to be set. If you are an employee within the UNC system and you are ignoring policies and laws set forth by higher governing bodies than you, then you unfortunately need to lose your job. It's as simple as that. There's no other way around it. You are proving that you are incapable, and that's an accurate term to use. You are proving that you are incapable of doing your job. And one of the other issues with all of this is it was kind of set up to fail like this, was it not? I mean, the fact that these individuals were not terminated from their positions when DEI-related policies were changed, you could have guaranteed this was going to happen. Just because you change somebody's email signature from chief equity officer to, head of student affairs or some other nonsense title, that's not going to change anything, right? Because this is an ideological battle that's going on. This is a true ideological argument that is going on over DEI. And of course, when we say that, we're not actually talking about things being diverse, equitable, or inclusive. If we've learned anything over the last couple of years, it's the folks that are yelling and screaming about DEI are some of the most violent offenders of DEI, right? They are not equitable in the things that they do. They are not inclusive in the things that they do, and they're not diverse in the things that they do. They want to shut down opposing viewpoints because they believe it's scary or it's hate speech or some other nonsense that they've made up. If you have a differing opinion from them, you need to be shouted off of campus. You need to have your life ruined. You need to be fired from your job if you dare speak something that we determine under the lens of DEI is highly offensive. If you misgender somebody or don't refer to them as their proper pronouns on their LinkedIn profile, you need to go straight to jail. You need to be hung in the public square for not referring to whatever as a he, she, it, they, them, whatever the hell acronyms that they've made up to describe themselves. That's the left. They're the same folks that are pushing DEI want you to have your life ruined for doing something that they've determined is hateful or harmful or hate speech, or the list just goes on and on and on. These groups are not diverse. These groups are not equitable. They are arguably the least inclusive groups out there. It's obvious. Show up to anything that's DEI related, give an opposing viewpoint, and you'll have a bunch of pink-haired leftist morons chasing you and throwing things at you and running down the street and attacking you for having a different viewpoint. I mean, that's what's being pushed by the left. The irony is almost unimaginable. Props to UNC Charlotte for acting in a swift manner on this. Again, I hate that this lady had to lose her job, but if she knew she was going to be in defiance of those policy-related matters as it relates to DEI, if she knew, which she did, that she was going to be potentially breaking state law, my level of sympathy is just non-existent. I don't have any. I don't want people's livelihoods to be taken away. I don't want people to lose their jobs and struggle with that. But at the same time, if you're going to put that on the line to push forward your political agenda, unfortunately, this is what the result is going to be. A very strong statement from UNC Charlotte, and hopefully people around the UNC system this morning are getting a wind of this and saying, oh, we better back off on this stuff. Because now there's precedent set that if you're caught doing this, which, by the way, interestingly enough to note, the group AIM, Accuracy in Media, notes that they have videos from at least 6 other UNC schools showing similar things. Now, when exactly and what schools we're talking about and when some of those details are set to be available, the answer to that is not immediately clear this morning. I don't know when that is going to happen or when we're going to see that, or if we're ever going to see some of that publicly. But they claim that they've got some more of that information available. And so with that, now we just wait and see. And if this is the case at other UNC schools, which of course we all know that it is going to be very interesting to see how some of these other schools react, watching how quickly Charlotte dealt with this. So we'll keep an eye on that right here on the Nick Craig Show. I want to tell you about the law group here in Wilmington this morning and thank them for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. When legal challenges arise, trust the law group in Wilmington. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across Eastern North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating real estate transactions, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense, the law group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved promptly. Located in downtown Wilmington, they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or their website, lawgroupnc.com, where you can go and they've got a great blog discussing a variety of legal matters, their area of practices. You can read bios about some of their attorneys as well. All of that at lawgroupnc.com. The Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. Once again, appreciate the Law Group for their support here of the show. On the other side, we have got multiple individuals across the United States that are suing the Trump administration over climate change. One of them saying, quote, "This is a death sentence for my generation." We'll get into this ridiculous story coming up after this as the Nick Craig Show rolls on live on a Friday morning, YouTube, Rumble, and X, and 24/7, wherever you get your podcasts. And welcome back to the Nick Craig Show, live on a Friday morning. I want to once again remind you for Monday afternoon to show up to the New Hanover County Board of Commission meeting, 4 o'clock at the historic courthouse in downtown Wilmington. That's 24 North 3rd Street. And voice your concern over the proposed tax increase that the New Hanover County Board of Commissioners are set to vote on later next month. That is coming up Monday. That's June the 2nd, 4 p.m. There was a budget workshop meeting yesterday that took place where there was some discussions of a lower rate. For whatever reason, that video was not published online, so I've already been in contact with the county this morning to try and get a copy of that. Normally, any of their meetings have to be publicly available, publicly recorded, or live streamed, and for whatever reason, that did not happen yesterday. So trying to get a copy of that video so we can go over the details on Monday, but nevertheless, it is still more than the revenue neutral rate. 4 p.m. Monday afternoon at the county commission meeting. I encourage you to show up, sign up to speak during the public comment, and voice your concern. We talked about this last night on our Zoom hangout for those that are members of our Patreon over at patreon.com/Nick Craig. We were talking about the involvement in local government. And there's this idea, and I've talking to elected officials, many of which I've been able to gain friendships and strong relationships with. One of the things I've heard over and over again is that, nobody bothers to reach out. Nobody bothers to call. Nobody sends an email. People, maybe they complain about it on social media. Maybe they complain about it to their friends or family, but they don't actually show up and voice their concerns. And, we as informed citizens, we need to hold a little bit of the responsibility on that. You've probably heard me say this before. We can't assume that elected officials know how we feel about something just because we posted a mean thing on X. Or we posted some sarcastic, smart-ass remark on Facebook, right? That does not equate to lawmakers, people that are responsible for making these decisions, to know what's going on. It is an absurd thing to believe that that's what's going to happen. So you've got to show up. You've got to make your voice heard. I'll be down there Monday afternoon, 4 o'clock. Hopefully you'll be there as well, and we can get a strong group. Will it have an impact? Will it have a difference? Who knows? But it's sitting on the sideline and complaining about it on Facebook, I can promise you, has absolutely no impact. Maybe a large enough group and maybe continued pressure forces and sways some of the opinions there. So again, Monday, 4 o'clock at the New Hanover County Courthouse. Well, here's an interesting story for you this morning. A group of 22 young Americans are suing the Trump administration over executive orders that the plaintiffs say will promote climate change. An executive order promoting climate change. How does that work? Did Trump sign an executive order to make the earth hotter? We've seen a lot of lawfare over Trump's executive orders, right? You're familiar with that. Did he specifically sign an executive order to say, we're going to raise the temperature of the earth by, 1 or 2 degrees over the next 20 years? And if he did, props to him if he has the ability to actually control that. Of course, he does not. The lawsuit filed yesterday in Montana challenges 3 executive orders which declare a, quote, national energy emergency. The Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, Environmental Protection Agency, and NASA are all named as defendants in the suit. One of the plaintiffs, Ava Lighthausen, says, quote, President Trump's fossil fuel orders are a death sentence for my generation. A death sentence? Fossil fuels? I mean, it's a young Americans, so let's assume they're in their, mid-20s? Let's go 25 years old. Something like that. You believe that fossil fuels, people driving gas-powered vehicles, is going to be your death sentence? Assuming that person lives to, around 80 years old, give them another 50 to 60 years to live, that they're going to die, not because of old age, not because of illness, but because of climate change? That's absurd. And it's going to this idea, you've probably heard one of the names used for the youngest generation as doomers, D-O-O-M-E-R-S, doomers, because they believe they're doomed. They have been brainwashed and indoctrinated by the left to believe that the biggest existential crisis that they face right now is climate change, that the oceans are going to rise and completely cover the United States of America and wash out half of the country. Everybody's going to have to push their way towards the Midwest to get away from the rising ocean the rising ocean levels. That the earth is just going to spontaneously combust one day because it's so warm. Climate change is just going to explode. These people are doomers. They have been told that their life is probably going to end short, not because of health, not because of a catastrophic injury or illness, but because of climate change. That their life is likely to end because of climate change. That's insane. But I guess when you're told from a very young age, the Democrats using the public education system as their greatest indoctrination tool, I guess it's probably not too crazy to believe that that's happening. It's probably not too far out there to believe that there's a very serious and real risk of this, because that's what you've been told from the time that you were, 8 years old going forward. Climate change this, climate change that, climate change this. End of the world. So when you've got this plaintiff saying that it's a death sentence for my generation, she genuinely believes that. I don't think she's crazy at all. I think that's what she's been told. That she's been led to believe by these wacko climate activists that if we don't stop driving gas-powered cars, she's going to die. Her children are going to live a short life because of climate change. What a miserable thing to teach people. What an awful thing to bring to the next generation. But that's what they've done. She added, quote, "I'm not suing because I want to. I'm suing because I have to. My health, my future, and my right to speak the truth are all on the line. He's waging war on all of us with fossil fuels as his weapon, and we're fighting back with the Constitution." Ava Lighthizen is joined by a youth plaintiff from Montana, along with others from, guess where? Hawaii, Oregon, and California. No surprise there. They've alleged that the president's executive orders violate their Fifth Amendment rights to life and liberty by deliberately worsening climate pollution that threatens their health and futures. That's one hell of an interpretation of the Fifth Amendment. Because of climate change, the United States government is encroaching itself on your Fifth Amendment rights. That is a crazy interpretation to make. In recent weeks, the Trump administration had issued orders aimed at expediting energy and infrastructure projects, promoting the use of coal, critical minerals, and fossil fuels, as well as sunsetting EPA regulations that prevent mining and offshore drilling. The White House and corresponding agencies did not immediately respond for comment on this matter. However, another individual in this, Dan Schneider, who is the director of Environmental Enforcement Project for Public Justice, said, quote, "Our children enjoy the same constitutional rights to life and liberty as adults, yet they have been tasked with shouldering the impact of a destabilizing climate system without even having a say in the matter," noting that President Donald Trump's executive orders are unlawful and intolerable, and these youth plaintiffs shall put an end to it. That's insane. I mean, there is absolutely no logic in what is being said here at all. Your Fifth Amendment rights are being encroached on by executive orders dealing with climate change. You know how crazy that sounds? That's what's going on, though. And I do, in fact, have a little bit of, I guess sympathy is the word I'll use. I do tend to have a little bit of sympathy for these individuals because they've been brainwashed. They have had beaten into their heads that if the federal government doesn't, quote unquote, stop climate change, I'll put that in air quotes because the federal government has absolutely no freaking control over the climate. But if the federal government doesn't stop climate change, that they're going to die. That their life is going to be over. That there's an existential threat that exists for them and that there's nothing they can do about it. They are hopeless and helpless as it relates to this issue. That there's nothing that they can do. There's a great video. I want to see if I can find it. It's dealing with climate change. There's some crazy wacko congresswoman who talked about a story with her daughter, where her daughter was of the mindset that the end of the world is happening, and that there's nothing that can be done, and it's all doomsday, it's all over with, there's no point of fighting. I mean, what a miserable situation. What a horrific situation. Yes, here it is. This is Katie Porter. She is a wacko, crazy Democrat from California. This video is from 2021. And obviously, Democrat representative from California, you already know she's insane. But this was the exchange in a conversation she had with her 9-year-old daughter. 9-year-old daughter back in 2021, who I guess now would be, 13, 14 years old, depending on the age. Listen to this from Katie Porter.
Ms. Thunberg, I just wanted to ask you one question. I have a 9-year-old daughter. I have 3 kids. And I told my 9-year-old daughter that I was going to be speaking with you. And I said, what do you think about the climate change? And she said, the earth is on fire and we're all going to die soon. And I asked her how that made her feel. And she said it made her feel angry. What should I tell my daughter? And how should I help her and the youngest generation bear the emotional toll of the actions that we're taking, fossil fuel companies are taking to destroy our planet?
So before we get into the illustrious answer here from the great climate scammer of them all, Greta Thunberg, also called Greta Doomberg because of her doomed nature of the rest of the world. What a miserable story from Representative Katie Porter. Your 9-year-old daughter is coming to you and saying, how do I bear and burden the responsibility knowing that the earth is on fire and that I'm going to die? Why in the hell would we be pushing that into the heads of children? Why would we be telling them that they're going to die because of climate change? What a miserable thing to put in front of a 9-year-old person. They have absolutely no control over climate change. And we are going to instruct them and beat into their heads that because of actions of fossil fuel companies, whatever the hell that means, that they are going to just drop dead when they're 30 years old. They're not even going to be able to get married and have children. They're going to be dead because of climate change. These people are freaking nuts. Let's hear what the great climate scientist Greta Thunberg has to say.
Thank you for a question. That's a big question, and I know that there are many young people who feel angry and sad because of all the things that some people are doing to this planet and to our futures and to the most affected people already today, and that's very understandable. It would be strange if we didn't feel that way, because then we wouldn't have any empathy. But of course, there is still much hope. And if we choose to take action, then we can do this. And there's unlimited things that we can do. And if we choose to act together, there are no limits to what we can accomplish.
Like what?
And always the best medication against anger and anxiety is to take action yourself. So that's what I would tell her, to take action herself, because that will make her feel so much better. That's what it did to me, at least, and so many others.
Oh, man. What a scam. What a ridiculous situation. So that's what Katie Porter's daughter thought back a couple of years ago. I wonder if she still believes the same thing. That the earth is on fire and that she is going to die. That's great. That's really setting up the next generation for an incredible amount of success. Hey, don't bother going to school and getting a job because the earth's on fire and you're just going to die. And that's really a way to inspire and motivate 8 and 9-year-olds. It's really a way to mold them into being productive members of society. Tell them that their life is essentially already over. They might as well just kill themselves, right? Because there's no point. The earth is just going to explode. It's on fire. We're all going to die. This is the left's teachings. This is what the left believes. And they use the public education system. They use the college system, the so-called institutions of higher learning, to promote this kind of incredibly radical, wacko ideology. They started at a young age, 7, 8, 9 years old, browbeat them through the K through 12 system, then ship them off to some ridiculous leftist school where their professors are going to talk about the evils of capitalism and how awful America is and climate change. This is how you doom a generation. This generation's not going to be doomed by climate change. They're going to be doomed by their own anxiety. They're going to be doomed by their inability to function as members of society because they believe that the battle's already been lost. What evidence have you seen? What evidence has been presented to you that the earth is on fire and that we're all going to die? That's exactly what Katie Porter said, relaying a conversation from her 9-year-old daughter. What scientific studies show that we're all going to die? Now, there might be scientific studies about old age, might be scientific studies about various forms of illness that would cause you to die. Absolutely. But because of climate change? And of course, the grift on all of this is that the United States over the last 20 years has significantly reduced its CO2 emissions. The United States has. You know who is not? China and India. So if you're going to be so pissed off about climate change, if you can't fall asleep at night because you're having to cry, you're trying to cry yourself to sleep over the fact that the earth is going to light itself on fire and everybody's going to spontaneously combust, maybe you should take a look at the Chinese Communist Party in China or the government in India, who are building new coal-fired power plants and putting those online like every couple of months. Both of those countries' CO2 emissions have ballooned, yet no conversation about that. No discussion about that. I don't see these 22 young Americans who filed this suit against the Trump administration. Why don't you sue China? Why don't you sue India? Why don't you sue all of the celebrities that you look up to, the Taylor Swifts of the world, who are going to tell me as a middle-class American that I'm killing the planet while driving my Volkswagen Jetta around while she flies around in a private jet to go get a cup of coffee? Piss off. I don't need this gaslighting from the left. Katie Porter, who's a representative in Congress, probably is on a plane twice a week flying back and forth from California to New York. She is burning way more CO2 emissions than I ever will in my entire life. I mean, I could sit in my front yard and just burn buckets of gasoline and not have anywhere near the CO2 emissions that people like Katie Porter do. Or all of these celebrities with their, Leonardo DiCaprio, the great climate change advocate that he is, with his multi-$100 million yacht that burns dozens of gallons of gasoline a minute. You guys are losing the battle on this stuff. All these great climate summits with all their Gulfstream jets and all their private planes flying in there, burning more CO2 in one plane trip than you will in your entire life driving your car that gets, 17 miles a gallon. It's absurd. This is why the left is losing. This is why their ideas are so unpopular with the American people. It just makes no sense. The things that they promote, the things that they allegedly support, the things that they push for, they're just crazy. And they're trying to beat this into the heads of 7, 8, 9-year-olds to teach them that because of Orange Man bad, because of Donald Trump, because of oil companies, that their life is just essentially over, that the earth is on fire? What kind of message is that to teach? These people are mentally ill. Fortunately, they're not in power right now, and I can only imagine how this legal battle is going to play out with these 22 people from Montana, Hawaii, Oregon, I guess California, suing the federal government over their Fifth Amendment rights to life and liberty due to climate change. I look forward to watching this laughed out of a courtroom. We'll keep an eye on it right here on the Nick Craig Show. Well, hey, that's going to do it for a Friday edition. Of course, next week we'll be talking a lot about the new Hanover County budget. Want to thank once again the law group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Give them a call at 910-251-6088 or visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. Hopefully you have a great weekend. We are back with you live Monday morning at 7 o'clock on YouTube, Rumble, and X, and 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts.